welcome to the River Volta podcast. Today we are interviewing Shannon McConnell. Shannon McConnell is a writer, educator, and musician originally from Vancouver, British Columbia. Her poetry and fiction have appeared in literary magazines across North America. She is a graduate of the University of Saskatchewan's MFA in Writing program, along with an MA in History. Shannon's debut poetry collection, The Burden of Gravity, was published with Caitlin Press in 2021 and won the first book award at the Sask Book Awards in 2021. In this haunting and disarming review. Oh no, did I make a mistake?
No. I thought you were done there. It was a little pause, but that's okay.
Oh no.
You can finish it off if you want to finish it off. It's all live.
It's all live. We'll do it live.
It's all good. Talk about me some more. It's all good.
Yeah, of course. In this haunting and disarming debut, McConnell recalls a dark time in BC's history to give poetic voice to the many forgotten residents of the infamous Woodlands school. In this poetry collection, Shannon McConnell explores the fraught history of New Westminster's Woodlands School, a former lunatic asylum, opened in 1878, which later became a custodial training school for children with disabilities before its closure in 1996. Partially set in the 1960s and 70s, The Burden of Gravity uses personas to imagine residents' lives, giving voice to those who are unable to speak for themselves, to shift focus from the institutional authority to the experience of residents. As poetry of witness, the collection uses a grounding tone to excavate the individual experiences through traditional narrative, ekphrastic, and experimental erasure forms that elicit an array of emotions from heartbreak to anger. Drawn from archival research, The Burden of Gravity challenges readers to consider how we, in the aftermath of deinstitutionalization, choose to remember institutions like Woodlands School.
Hello.
Hey.
Yeah. Yeah. That was quite the intro. I think we got a full rundown. I was thinking it was very prescient, this collection. But you've been writing it. You started in 2017.
I started working on the collection 2015.
2015.
Yeah.
Yeah, with all the residential schools going on, it's almost like a lead-in to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap with Woodlands and what was happening at residential schools. Different contexts, but I mean the idea of abuse being rampant in these kind of institutions is very, very true in all of them.
What like kind of was the initiator of the idea, or like how did you get into that?
Let's go back many a year. When I was doing my undergrad, I was in a creative writing class because I've been a creative writing nerd for quite some time. But we had this a little writing prompt that was like this picture of just a room with like beds and like a crib, and the crib had like kind of cage, kind of chain link fence around it, what it looked like that. And so it was like this prompt, okay, write about what you think this is and what's going on in this picture. And after we did that, my teacher, she kind of explained to us, like, this was Woodlands School. This happened, like I went to school in Abbotsford, which is about 45 minutes away from New Westminster, where the school was. And I had never heard of the school at all. And I'd grown up in the Lower Mainland my whole life, and I was in my 20s at that point. And I was just shocked that this place existed. I had no idea. I grew up so close to it and had no idea what was happening. The school only closed in 1996, which is super recent and disturbingly recent. And so, yeah, I had found out about it, and I did a lot of research, just kind of going to the library and finding out what I could. And it was something that didn't sit right with me, but I didn't know what to do with it. I'd taken a historical fiction class kind of a couple years later and tried to write fiction about it, but I was so focused on all the terrible things that were happening there that I just couldn't write about it in a meaningful way that I thought it just wasn't working. And so I kind of put that to the back burner. and it was just something I was interested in. And it wasn't until the MFA in writing program that I had a chance to actually dig into the topic. And it's kind of funny how it came up. You're both in the MFA in writing program, so and you probably both had to apply for SHIRK. I shake my fist at SHIRK, but they did give me money 1 year, so thank you. Hopefully, they'll give me money again.
I don't know what SHIRK is.
SHIRK, you don't know what a SHIRK is?
Oh, it's the
it's you apply to the
grants,
government,
right?
yeah, the big money maker that will save you and give you money to survive when you're a poor grad student.
I obviously did not get it, Shannon.
Yeah, I didn't get it when I was doing MFA in writing. It wasn't until after.
Yeah.
But in those early months of the MFA in writing program, Jeanette sits you down and says, "Well, what do you want to write about for your application?" And I was like, "I don't know. I came here to write a novel. So, well, there's this one thing I was thinking about for a long time. There's a school." And Jeanette's like, "Ooh, that sounds interesting." And that's really when it started. We started talking about the school, and she's like, "Well, this is probably something you want to look into more." And it seemed like the right place and time for it. Didn't end up being a novel, and my dreams of being a fiction writer at the time kind of took a turn, and I was like, well, I guess I'm writing poetry. So yeah, it came out of that, and I was able to, like, the program was an excellent place for me to dig into these topics and really work on my voice and poetry and make the project kind of come to life.
I got two questions for you. One, what about the novel? How would you have done it? Would you have done it like a fictional character within the school, or would you have done it like a narrative nonfiction novel? Or
see, this is what I was having such a hard time with originally, because, and you'll see when I read, I never take on the I persona. I never want to be the voice of the children, because I just don't feel like that's my place. But this way I can be kind of the wallflower, the witness to what's happening. It's less about a persona experiencing it, but rather just witnessing what's happening in the rooms to the kids. So yeah, originally I had wanted to write from the first person perspective, and that gets complicated with like archival material, and often that material is not written by survivors. There is some, but there's not a lot. So it's hard if you want it to be accurate, and that's what I've always wanted it to uplift the patient perspective rather than other perspectives. So yeah, as much as I love writing first person and such, this project, I don't think it would have worked for that. I don't think I would have been able to humanize the children in the way that I can with kind of taking a step back.
I was also curious about the moment that you realized, oh, this is poetry. Like this is how you tell the story, you know? And if that was like a freeing moment.
I don't know if it's ever been a freeing moment.
Yeah.
But when I went into the program, and once I kind of realized what my topic was, that mentorship that first summer was huge. I kind of thought, okay, I've tried fiction before, and like the great thing of, I'm probably just going to talk about how much I love the program for this hour. So
okay.
probably gonna brag about Jeanette and how awesome she is. So
go listen to this, though. You'll love it.
get used to me just bragging and praising the program for how awesome it is. But that when I went into the program, and I realized you get like 6 months with a professional writer. Like, this is awesome. Like, when am I going to get this chance again? And I recognized that poetry was definitely my weakest genre. And if I get 6 months with a professional, maybe I should do my weakest genre so I can like boost that up and get that to a higher level. And it just worked out that way. I worked with Liz Phillips. I don't know if you've gotten to meet her yet. She is fantastic. And she was super helpful with me approaching the topic, because when I started, I was like, for the longest time, I wouldn't even say that I was writing a manuscript. Even on my laptop, I had a folder named That Giant Thing I'm Writing, because I didn't want to recognize it as like this real thing. Even now, it's like, I have a book of it, but still it's like, well, it's this thing I have. Imposter syndrome, very real. But yeah, I with having such an opportunity to really dig into poetry, I was like, well, this is it. And it took a while to decide on not doing the first person, because I was like, well, I've done all this research. Where do I even start? And Liz was just like, just write, and we'll see what happens. Like, oh, yeah, we could do that. That's a great idea. And she really helped me to hone in on voice and trying to figure out what I was doing. That 6 months was huge. You're probably just
we're in the middle of
that.
We're in the middle of it right now. Well, I'm almost done. I've done eight submissions so far. So
oh, nice. Yeah.
I have 3. Oh no, I've done 7. So 8 is next Monday. But yeah, it's been great. I think we're also lucky because ours is across Canada because of COVID. And usually, I think most of your mentors were in Saskatchewan, I think, or locally.
Yeah, we had one person that was out of province, but it's nice that you get a
ours is the opposite. I think it's pretty rare locally right now. Yeah,
I mean, I'll probably switch back because Saskatchewan has amazing writers. The community is just like you can't go to McNally and not bump into an amazing writer. It's just they're everywhere and they're so awesome. See, I'm just gonna brag about Saskatoon.
Yeah. I think Callum is actually the only person who has a local writer and in person, but half our people are not in Saskatoon right now.
That's wild.
Yeah. Well, what about Brandon?
Oh yeah, Brandon. I guess he has Guy. He's Guy Vanderhaeg. Yeah.
Guy Vanderhaeg. Whoa.
Oh yeah, I think so. The first time he's ever done a mentorship.
I know everyone's wanted to work with him, but he's a tough guy to get. I took his fiction class in my second year. Super, super fun class.
Yeah, he was our second guest, I think, on the podcast.
He's a good time.
Yeah.
He's great. Yeah, great. I think he did his last year. I think it was his last year teaching.
Oh wow.
Yeah, was this winter.
Shifting into the mentorship. That's awesome.
Yeah.
He's a great part of the community and just.
Do you think because you did your thesis and your mentorship in poetry that now your main, because you said it's your weakest, is it now your strength or your main outlet?
Yeah, I haven't gone back to fiction yet. It's poetry. I've really fallen in love with it, and I have a problem with just buying poetry books. I can't. Whenever I go into like McNally or Chapters or whatever, I tell myself I can buy one poetry book, no more, because I know that I'm going to buy at least one. So kind of have to cut myself off. Sometimes
it's so
it
easy
works.
to buy because you don't feel like you have to read them. Like you can just look through them a little bit here and there.
And they're so small. They're just they fit on the bookshelf so nicely.
With your collection, did you write it as if someone would read it from left to right, or do you write it knowing that people might pick it apart here and there?
Originally, I kind of wrote it all over the place, but when I put it together, because it's actually in 2 sections, there's kind of this before time, really looking into building a relationship between the reader and the characters. And then the second half is kind of a darker, after the closing of the institution, kind of a reflection. But how I've built it, it's so that I would introduce a character. So there's like a brief little sort of bio where it states their name. And I didn't send this to you guys, but I should, just so.
It's really interesting. Yeah.
I'll just show you.
Yeah, I'd love to see what it looks like. For some reason, yeah.
So I have like the name, and so I've blacked out information like their diagnosis and their medication, because the main point was that you're seeing them as a human, not their diagnosis, not what they're there for, because not every person that was there had a diagnosis. Sometimes they were just sent there. So it was really about getting to connect with the the person. You learn their name. There's a little poem that kind of connects to them, and then there will be a poem or two about them interspersed with a couple other poems, and then there would be another character. You get the name and such, and then a few other poems, and then once all the characters were kind of put in there, then it's kind of a mix leading up to just kind of working through the poems. So it's this gradual introduction, so that when you get from this first section into the second section, it hits you a lot harder, realizing like now you're connected to these children, and now you're understanding the weight of what happened there. And once you have that connection to children, or really anyone, it hurts a lot more to know that they were so badly abused, and that even as adults they weren't getting the compensation that was earned, or what was necessary for what they experienced.
That's interesting. I didn't think about them as adults. Did you do, how much research did you do on their experience after, or did you reach out to any of them?
I didn't reach out to any of them for a couple of reasons. One, the ethics review that's involved with that is I wouldn't be doing it wouldn't have been a 2-year MFA. It would have taken a lot longer because there's certain hoops you have to jump through when you're working with actual humans. But I had done extensive research. I went to the archives. I've done a whole lot, and I've read survivor accounts. And there's 2 books that were published by the province that kind of talk about Woodlands history. And there's one book that talks about like memories of Woodlands that was written by staff, like they contributed to it. And so doing what the historians call reading against the grain, I look at instances that they would talk about and think about, okay, if this is what the staff were experiencing, like what are the patients and residents, what was their feeling during these things? Because a lot of the times, just because like the 60s and 70s, different ideas, different understandings of disabilities and such, that just the language that was used, now I'm like, oh, that's a red flag. That's a red flag. And so kind of deconstructing these memories that people are talking about, and kind of building poems out of those ideas, while also recognizing the actual narratives that have come out from actual survivors. There was a lot that came out in the papers when they finally demolished the rest of the school. So there was like a whole ceremony that happened. And so some of these stories, little snippets were coming out. And I kind of latched onto those and brought them into my collection. So lots of different sources happening. So much work.
Can you talk a little bit more about reading against the grain? I like that term. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I love it because a lot of my work now and my PhD is building off my work with Woodlands, and so it's a lot of recognizing who's writing these sources. Often I've been working with writings done by the government, and let's be real, the government's not always being forthright with what happened. So you have to kind of read between the lines and think about what their motives were, what's not being said. A lot of the time, what's not being said, those silences is where the real meat of what's happening is hiding. So there's lots of silences in my writing, which, like, sometimes I'll mention abuse outright, but a lot of it is the reader catching on to what's really happening and making it clear, but not like pushing it on the reader. It's this fine balance.
Have you ever read any Michael Ondaatje's work, where like Billy the Kid, or because he does a lot of like metafictional fake histories of real situations or people, and he has a lot of poetry in there, and he does a lot of stuff about how like reading between the lines, or he'll give you like an ingredients list of something random, and it's kind of like how historians will look at stuff and they have to pick what they choose. Like, so in these poems, you had to kind of pick like you had to leave stuff out and leave stuff on, or like decide what is going to be shown, and there's some kind of narrative that you're presenting, right? That can't be 100% true.
Yeah.
There has to be a certain form of truth, right?
Yeah, it's truth rather than fact. If you don't want to debate,
right? Oh, I like
all
that.
that.
That's a good.
Yeah,
that's a really good distinction. Truth rather than fact.
and
I'm gonna write that down, and I don't know why, but I'm gonna write it down for some reason.
Well, it's really whose truth are you telling? And
Yeah.
in this collection, I chose to tell the truth of survivors and the residents at the school rather than staff and administration, because all the history up until this point really has been from that authoritative point of view, and it's only in the recent kind of histories, kind of what historians are looking at, how they're looking at history, that they're like, well, let's shift the perspective and let's look at the voices that we haven't been listening to, which is like everyone besides white men. So yeah, but it's finding the truth kind of in the silences, in between the lines, is really key, and I think really important.
Yeah. Were there some key works that you read, like of poetry or of, like, say, history? Well, not even history, but more, poetry, that kind of informed it, or to like inform the style, or?
Lisa Bird Wilson's The Red Files was. It came out like right when I was beginning the MFA in writing, and so she uses archival work to look at residential schools. It's a excellent read. And also Nadine McInnes, she wrote, oh, it's gonna bother me, I think it's called Two Hemispheres, something along those lines. So she did, she basically she went to archives in, I believe, England, and looked at an asylum out there and took photos from the archives and built poems around that, looking at mental illness kind of in these certain asylums. And those two were huge in kind of showing me what kind of style, what I might do, kind of approach this topic with such a grounding in archival research.
I find those questions are always very similar. Like, what's your favorite movie? And you're like, I've never seen a movie before in my life. I don't know what just happened to my brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had the book on my shelf for years.
Yeah.
Like, you think I could remember? It's going to hit me like right after we're done.
Yeah. Callum, did you have any more questions before we got into the reading?
No, actually, that's awesome. I was just I think, if I recall right, we read excerpts from Red Files in our poetry
I was trying to think of it, right? That was the one that is redacted, right? There's a redacted. Yeah, I was actually trying to think of it, and I looked in our Blackboard to see if I could find it, but they're all gone from last year, so I couldn't find it.
You're just gonna have to buy the book.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
That was from Red Files or Natalie McInnes's work? Is that Callum? The redacted one.
No, it was Lisa Bird Wilson's poem.
Lisa Bird Wilson, gotcha. Yeah, I want to go back and read those because they were really cool.
I feel like we did also read from Nadine McInnes, but can't remember that. I do remember like the black bars in the Wilson poem. Yeah,
you guys read so much in those classes that it's like it all kind of blurs together after a while.
Yeah, was Lisa Bird Wilson the redacted one, or was it blacked out, or was it both in the same? There's one that was really cool that was all redacted. Everything was redacted. It's like the main horribleness was all redacted, but it was implied.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was Lisa Bird, and I have the file of the readings somewhere.
Well, I'll throw it in somewhere after this.
We're not here for a scavenger hunt. We're here for an interview.
Yeah. It's just going to be us Googling for an hour.
Yeah. All right. Well, Shannon. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Callum.
No, I was just making a joke.
Yeah, you can never repeat jokes. They don't land. No. Yeah, Shannon, we'll mute ourselves and then hide our video. And then you can begin whenever you want.
I picked a bunch of poems. I don't know if that's too much. So if it's too much, cut me off at any point.
I think you should just read it, whatever you you think you want to read.
Or if the poems get too sad and you need a moment.
Don't worry, we'll be our video will be hidden, so if we're crying,
Yeah.
nobody will see.
There's a few that might punch you a little hard. Even when I give the book to friends or and tell them like, okay, you need to watch something funny after this, or like read in small excerpts because it's gonna ruin your day.
Mhm.
So, all right, I'll stop blabbering and I'll read some poetry. All right, this first one is called Stones. 1958. The last body covered, padded with shovels, the final gravestone placed. All those who came after, unclaimed, transported to the university, cadavers. 1977. The hospital board claimed the sick and the elderly didn't want to see rows of death markers from their windows, their future. 1,800 gravestones relocated into the city. Staff used some stones to build a retaining wall behind the school. Autumn rains seeped into the soil, dislodging the slabs, tumbling them into the creek, submerged. 1986. Playing in her front yard, a young girl pulled loose one of the stones from the pathway. She wiped the dirt off, perplexed by the letters and numbers. Her father dug out 100 more from the driveway. Visitors discover the patio behind the school, where staff gathered for barbecues, was a puzzle of leveled stones, forced pieces, some face up. 1999. 500 stones recovered, every chunk and fragment rescued, regardless of size, shape, or integrity. While preparing to convert the cemetery to a memorial garden, 9 stones are discovered, forgotten in the purge, left concealed in the solitude of fallen trees, branches, overgrown grass, and moss. 2007. Survivors gather at the garden, somber, despite the steady squeal of power tools, condos rising across the street. They congregate, hands gripping, tissues, walking through the park. They pause, read each name on the rows and rows and rows of inset stones and plaques. Wedged between the rows, an 8-foot block of granite, its eerie black surface, buffed of imperfections, holds their gaze, aged reflections. Below it, sunken into the dirt, one new stone, inscribed, respect. And this is the title poem of the book. It's The Burden of Gravity. From behind the plane of his ward, Paul watches a colony of seagulls glide up from the Fraser. Their mocking scatters. Paul longs to detach from the burden of gravity, hollow his bones, sprout dark feathers all over his smooth adolescent skin. He's eager to join the other birds on the green, sun-bleached shingles outside his window, silent and crouching between folded wings, waiting for freedom's lifting breath. And this one's called Smoke Scare. The fire alarm beats in a high register. Residents evacuate to the lawn. Men in dark suits dig their hands into their pockets, anchoring themselves between residents carried from the beds in white sheets. The children, left on their backs, gaze towards the building, bewildered by the brisk morning air. They settle, rest their eyes on slouching mountains, descending into foothills they'll never see. Little pink pills. At 1 in the afternoon, the children of Ward 43 are asleep on foam mats, scattered across the floor. Arms and legs sprawled like birds dropped from the sky. 2 nurses circulate around the maze of children, pausing to watch their chests slowly rise and fall. A couple of children snore loudly, letting out drones that swirl around the room. A nurse puts her hand in front of their mouths, feeling the hot breath on her skin. Makes a note. Dr. S will be pleased. Wallflower. Winnie sits facing the wall, light blue, peeling paint, 2 pigtails dangling down her back. The other girls brush each other's hair with their fingers while stifling coughs. They sneer, hurl insults at Winnie's head. She wipes her dark bangs from her eyes, her mouth on her cotton dress sleeve. Each slowly rounded sentence on her lips recounts her every action of the morning. She rubs her chest, suppressing coughs, and swift rising secrets, saved for the blue, peeling wall, her oldest friend. Detention. Michael and Paul sit across from each other, locked in an 8x10 room for fighting. From the window, barred, they hear other children on the playground, the creak of chains, shoes across gravel, careful laughter. The boys ball up their socks, toss them, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. They watch the sun stretch the bar's shadow across the yellowing linoleum until night pulls the black bars back into the window. Miss Taylor. The hot lights of Hollywood don't shine in these halls. Elizabeth insists the nurses call her Miss Taylor. She makes some coffee, always takes hers black, red stains pressed against the lip of her mug. They don't know where she gets the lipstick. She won't speak of the trail of men she's left scattered along the coast, nor the films her face has graced. No, she won't bore the nurses with Hollywood gossip. They prefer their balding husbands and afternoon soaps to illuminated marquees. She tells the nurse that she's shaken out the names of past lovers lurking in her hair. She's grown tired of the big screen, no longer wants scripted words in her mouth. Her own are stronger proof than in the drinks sipped with Hudson or Dean. She hears the nurses behind half-closed doors share that Miss Taylor has a face only the blind would pay to see. She brushes the wrinkles from her dingy black dress, adjusts her fading pearls. She's never been one to give a damn. Terranot. Paul takes one small step toward the television, pressing his hand against the static-filled screen. He touches the moon as Armstrong, 400,000 kilometers away, stands in dust. Paul longs to be the loneliest man in the universe, free from the lunacy of gravity among the basaltic plains. Fill his pockets with moon rocks, take one giant leap toward the marble swirl of weightless and disoriented cosmic debris. Biters. He remembers the pliers hovering above his face. He fought against the arm and leg restraints chafing his skin. Now he leans against the cracked porcelain and stares into the mirror. He cannot recognize his own face, except for his blue eyes, now encircled by burgundy bruises, like staring through binoculars. The rest of his face, a blend of purple patches crawling up his swollen cheeks, where the white masked doctor grabbed his jaw. This is how we fix the biters. He tries to open his mouth, but his lips are bruised, only a thin slit separating them. He winces, cautious, runs the tip of his tongue over his empty gums. On days without rain, the nurses divide the residents into groups, taking them to the courtyard to walk hand in hand, grown-ups and children. Sharon is stuck with an old man's sausage fingers and clammy palms. He squeezes her hand, her knuckles rolling under her skin. A teenage girl, 2 years her junior, pulls on Sharon's other arm, grasping her left hand tight, digging her freshly chewed nails into the creases of Sharon's palm. They cross the courtyard like a chain of clumsy paper dolls. Sharon scans the grounds for trees with thick branches hanging over the fence, waiting for the nurse to turn them back. Clipped wings. Paul sneaks to the roof, leans against the cement center block. His wavy hazelnut hair deciphers the wind's direction. He steadies himself, his left arm outstretched while taking uneasy steps along the slanted shingles. His right arm is pulled close to his chest in a blinding white cast, a consequence of his last rooftop appearance. One by one, children on the playground slow their game of tag, crane their necks upwards. Some point fingers, others snicker at the boys staggering along the roof. None of the children run to call a nurse. Every pair of eyes eager to see if the broken boy will fall again. Paging Nurse Dawn. Did you know it was him when you found Debbie hunched over the toilet, her adolescent arms trembling as she held the curve of the porcelain? Did you know it was him when you rubbed slow circles between her shoulder blades? Did you know it was him when you steadied her, pulled dirty cotton nightgown over her head, gazed down at the growing convex in her taut skin? Did you know it was him again? Geranium red. They take the hospital gown off, ease Miss Taylor's head back down onto the cool marble slab, lift her, pull the clean floral dress over her head. Each nurse takes a turn sliding an arm through a sleeve, tugs the dress down her cold back. They lift her hips and tug at the fabric until the hem of the dress rests above her ankles. One nurse brushes Miss Taylor's hair, tucks the thin white hair behind her cold ears. The other nurse wrings out a cold cloth, wipes the thick layer of red lipstick off Miss Taylor's lips. They fold her arms across her chest, close her eyelids, check their watches. There's still time for a quick cigarette. Waste not. One plot can fit many children if you bury them standing up. I think I'll just read. I'll read two more. This one is actually going to be interesting because it's a erasure piece. So I'll just give you a quick look. So I've blacked out all the words I don't want. I used a newspaper for this particular piece, and we'll see how it lands. I find it hits a little more when you see the black in front of you as you read, but we'll see how this goes. The dead BC hid. Here, the weeds grow in brushed dirt, faded concrete surface. Overlook, erase, woodlands, long forgotten from existence, neglected, history, a graveyard, wiped from, memory, stones, marked, notorious, wooded lands, overgrown, search, history, woodlands, didn't exist, hearses, move, weed choked, slope, time, buried, slight indentations, 3,000 graves, obscured, left behind, retain, twist, the indignity of woodlands, tracking down, names, never found, recovered, used, erasure of, lives, names, hidden, the missing, never heard, records, buried, 70 years, headstones, jumbled pile, weep, they will be forgotten. And I'll just read one last one. It's the last piece in the collection. Memorial Drive. Sediment and sturgeons settle below, a tugboat pulling logs, landscapes leftovers up the Fraser River. Along the shoreline, the freight train's dirge hovers above the percussive clanging of steel. Up the hill, machinery drones, stacking concrete story upon story, extending skyward. A two-car collision on the Patello plots commuters along the curve of McBride Boulevard, down Memorial Drive, where residents creep through carbon monoxide close their morning eyes to the sharp reflection of the sun climbing into the mirror and through the black-barred window, too high for other eyes, drawing shadows on the cement path as the impatient ones cut through the garden, eyes on their phones, oblivious to the silence, buried with soil and bones. Thanks.
Wow. I'll let Callum start us off with any immediate reactions.
When I was reading the Erasure poem, it was very interesting. The copy that I have, it isn't all the way blacked out. The omitted words are still there in white, and so it's very interesting to read that and have like both contexts occur at once. And a mantra I was repeating while reading this is "Forgotten no more." These people are forgotten no more because of this work, and it's very good work that we get to see these people as they were, human beings, and how they, you know, there was an attempt to hide them away, but forgotten no more.
Yeah, we see it's yeah. The point of my collection was really to bring this back into kind of awareness, because like I grew up like not that far from here and I didn't know about it, and my friends didn't know about it, and it wasn't until I started talking to people, um, when I worked at a grocery store for many years, and I was talking to some of the older employees, and they're like, "Yeah, like my grandma worked there, or my aunt worked there," and all of a sudden there was all these little connections. But my generation, which is a little bit older than you guys, just a tiny bit, but we had no idea, and it's it's shocking, and it makes me think, okay, what's the next generation? Are they even going to know about BC's history? And it's like there was these kind of schools in multiple provinces. Like right now, part of my PhD research is looking at a similar institution in Ontario. So it's like there's so much of this dark history in Canada that's being kind of pushed away because no one wants to think about the bad part of history. But now we're like, hey, we need to recognize this. Like it's gone so long without being recognized that we need to start talking about it. We need to start teaching this, and because these were people. These were people with families, parents, grandparents, friends. Like these were humans that loved people and deserved to be acknowledged and to be loved. And it's just it's a lot to unpack. My work is, I have a bit of a reputation of being a bit of a downer with my writing. You wouldn't have guessed, right? But like I'm attracted to these darker subjects because like someone's got to do it, and other people have written about rainbows and unicorns already. They can handle that. I'll go for the darker stuff.
What's the institution in Ontario? You said.
It was Huronia Regional Center, and it was in Orillia, Ontario. My geography of Ontario is still being built, but it's about 3 hours ish away from Kingston. I base everything off of Kingston now.
Yeah, someone had wrote a short story in the guy class we were talking about, and it was on another institution in Ontario. And I was wondering if it was the same, but it's slightly different. I think it was only for adults, and it was very experimental.
Okay, yeah, there was quite a few in Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big one. There was a big one in Alberta too, which they were big on eugenics, which is a whole other can of worms, to say the least.
Yeah, there's a dark history of psychology or psychotherapy. Yeah, in the when they really didn't know what was going on. And I guess even if you look at it from like a surgeon point of view, in medicine, there's a dark history of horrible experiments in surgery. You know, in the early 1900s.
Oh yeah, don't get me started on lobotomies. I could talk for hours on that.
Another thing I noticed that was interesting in the it's not blackout poetry. It's called
erasure.
Erasure. Okay.
I mean, some people call it blackout, but
okay.
Erasure sounds cool too.
I noticed, and I wasn't sure if it was we have a different version, but some of the words are not like as Callum said, but also some of the words are there that you weren't saying. And I don't know if we have a updated or older version.
I think you probably have an older version.
I always find it interesting what people have updated, or even when I'm hearing them read it, you notice that they'll change a word while they're reading.
Yeah.
Instinctually, and I always find it really interesting. Like the post, it never stops. The editing just will never ever end.
It's constant editing. You're like, oh, I wish I had used that word, but now it's in print, and there's like you have to kind of let go of it at a certain point.
Yeah. I find it with it's probably similar with painting, but there's a point, probably similar with every art you do, but there's a point where you just go, okay, it's done. It's not done, but it's I'm done.
Good enough. I'm done wrestling with it. Yeah.
There is an interesting thing that happens with the erasure poetry that I noticed, that because you read it so slow, and for me, I was reading it slowly, but you read it even slower, really impactful. But it almost creates this like really somber voice because of that pause between each word. Which I thought was interesting. So I think it really works with the material.
Yeah, it's weird to think about, like, is erasure something you read out loud, or is it something you look at? Because, I mean, poetry in general is meant to be heard, but, like, erasure is very much the visual aspect of it. But, like, it's this fine line of, like, which, I guess, it's impactful on many levels. It's just a matter of how you kind of approach it.
Yeah, I guess there are some poems that are very visual as well.
Yeah.
But even when I read it myself, you still get that break in each word because you just have to find, like, you have to scan a little bit.
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting to I love erasure because it could be anything like that comes out of it. Like you could have 50 different poems from that one newspaper article, and it's just a matter of what is I'm picking up and what kind of fits. And yeah, it could have gone 50 different ways, but this is kind of where it went.
Shannon, you seem to also answer questions that I'm going to have next in your
Yes.
answer, which is awesome. But yeah, how do you said you could have different 50 different poems from the newspaper? Because I was going to ask, where did you get these, or where are they from? But also, how do you pick the, like, when you're reading it, does it just stand out like, oh, there's words in here that I really like, or?
Yeah, I've read many different articles, but there's always some words that just when you read them, they feel kind of poetic, which I know is kind of like nerdy poetry, kind of like,
I don't think
oh,
it's nerdy poetry. I
it's
think that's probably, like, every writer reads something and they go, oh,
it's all about
that
my
stands out.
feelings. But yeah, just reading certain articles, there's just words that will like resonate with you, and sometimes like whole paragraphs are just like there's nothing in there, but sometimes there's just strong words. And um, for a different collection that I'm sort of working on, kind of on the back burner, I'm using scientific, like a lab kind of book, and just the scientific language itself is really poetic. I'm like, oh, this is easy to do erasure because they're giving me so many great words to begin with. So yeah, it's just it seems silly, but like just going by feel and what feels right, um, which is not helpful for anyone. But like you kind of have to just kind of follow your instincts with words.
Yeah, I do feel like almost all writing is feel. Like, you do in the process of editing, it's gonna be, you're gonna go off more technique or stuff, but like the initial is almost all feel. So I get that, like, when you're reading something, you're just feeling like there's something here.
Yeah, words hit certain ways, kind of inside your bones, and you have to kind of recognize it when they do kind of hit, and like, oh, that could be something. And sometimes, like with erasure, it's at first I was hesitant to use like the black marker because that's so permanent. But turns out you can just print off the article again and and have another go at it. Um, but but yeah, it's a great. I was talking to a friend the other day talking about erasure, and saying how like when you're just like out of ideas, like pick up some kind of book and like open a page and just start marking away, because it's awesome when someone's already written the source material. Half of the work is done for you. When you can't come up with words yourself, use someone else's, but not
Tom, have you done
plagiarize
any
it.
erasure?
Have I done erasure? Well,
Yeah.
actually, while we're on the subject, I've done maybe three in my whole life. My latest was a pamphlet from an MLA here in Mewassen,
Hmm.
who will not be named, and I just took a Sharpie and just made them say
Who will be erased?
juvenile.
Change their political
Yeah,
opinions.
yeah. No, it was very junior high, but I had a fun time with it.
I mean, gotta do what you gotta do.
It was therapeutic for sure.
Oh, it's interesting that you said, yeah, you can just print off more, because whenever I read something or that I haven't done, I always think, how would I do it? And I was thinking I would print off like multiple versions and just do like a little erasure on each one and see what kind of different ones came out.
Yeah, it definitely takes some practice, and like your first attempt, you're gonna be like, oh, I shouldn't have got rid of that word. That would have really helped. And so it kind of during the editing process sometimes, or even like sometimes I'll just do it on my computer, and you can just use black bar, which is awesome, which is what most of it for my book is. I just put it on the computer, and that way you can actually undo, which is helpful. But yeah, it's I think it's a great kind of way to go beyond just traditional page poetry and kind of subvert things and mess with things a little bit. And it's fun. It's fun to use the marker.
I don't want to get bogged down in just the erasure because there's a ton of good poems in here. Great poems. Callum, is there anyone that sticks out that jumped out to you?
I love the poems with Paul, especially Terra Naught. I don't know. My dad missed the moon landing in 1969. I think he was hurt or something. He didn't get to watch it on TV. So it was really neat to see somebody reacting to the moon landing. And that's exactly how I would feel if I were, stuck somewhere. If I were stuck on Earth and I was watching somebody else, I'd want to touch the moon too and take moon rocks, and it was very touching. I was also, a climber, kind of like Paul, so maybe there's that in there. And I loved Wallflower, and it made me think about the structure of the poem itself. It's interesting that it was all in couplets, and it's like, well, there's this person who's alone, but there's all these twos. Two can be as bad as one. It's sort of like this weird, ironic highlighting of Winnie's solitude, that it's all in couplets. I thought that was really neat.
Yeah, definitely with the poem, Winnie's poem, that was really about slowing down the poem and really making you feel that loneliness, and being that witness of everything that's going on while she's just by herself, kind of up against the wall, talking to the wall, and feeling that sense of isolation. And I don't use couplets a lot, but I think that was one of the poems I wrote in my mentorship, and Liz had suggested that kind of pacing, and I think it really helps to just slow things down and really get the reader into the moment and understand what's happening around. And I like that you picked up on Paul. Paul's my favorite. Paul's not real. None of these people are specifically real people, but Paul's like my favorite.
I actually wrote down, is Paul the MC of the story?
He's the one that I think I introduced first, just because his poems are the ones that I feel like are probably more connected to the overarching kind of feel, and the different kind of perspectives of what's going on. Because one moment he's up on the roof, another moment he's watching the TV. He kind of gets the more significant moments of the collection, and he's my favorite, and he kind of comes through the most, I think. Even though none of these people are actually real, although the specific moments that I kind of point to, these are all kind of real things that would have happened or did happen. For instance, a lot of my poems are based on photos. And so there's one photo with a bunch of kids looking at a TV. And so I was like, well, what's a big thing that happened in TV during that time? And I was like, oh, the moon landing. Oh, that connects really well to the idea of Paul, who's trying to escape this place. And it just, how it connected, it just really worked out. Paul's really about trying to get beyond the walls when he's clearly stuck in this school.
Yeah.
And yeah.
That's what I'd written down for Paul, because I asked myself, I was like, why the moon landing? And I was like, well, I guess the moon landing is kind of like the ultimate freedom.
Yeah.
It's kind of the ultimate opposite of where they are in their life, and they're trapped, which is interesting. It's like a you're sitting there and you have an infinite world to go in, and Paul's sitting there just like with the walls around him.
Yeah, he's the most kind of explorative within the institution, and yet he wants to be the loneliest person in the universe, and yet he can't have that for anything.
When I was reading Wallflower, I was wondering, that original writing prompt that you had, did it make its way into the collection at all? For some reason, Wallflower seemed like it was close.
It's probably the closest to it. I actually didn't use that photo, but it was one I did come back to, just to get more of a grounding of what the rooms look like and just build the setting out more. But yeah, no, that photo actually didn't make it into the collection, probably because there wasn't any people in it. I was more drawn to photos with people in it, just because I could connect more on an emotional level, seeing their expression and trying to understand what that moment was like for them and what they were feeling, and maybe what they were there for, what their disability might have been, or if they had anything, any disabilities or anything like that. So I spent a lot of time just looking at photos and kind of in my head, kind of thinking about it.
Did you put any of the photos in the collection?
No, there's no photos at all, which seems like a bit of a disconnect because, but I think the poems stand alone. I don't think you need to see the photo to understand the poem.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't think so. I don't think so.
but with like archives and like all that stuff, my original thesis didn't have it, and it was an extra hoop I would have had to go through, and then it's like, well, what photos do I want to put in? And there's it's a lot to unpack. My
Yeah,
PhD will have more photos, I think.
I was going to say you can buy the DVD and then you'll get the extras.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the director's commentary.
Yeah, exactly. That would be fun to do, like going over have you ever done that? You said you're going to do it in your PhD, but going over the photos and kind of deep diving into them.
Or when my book came out, I have like a professional like Facebook profile, whatever. And so right before the book came out, I was posting the photos, a couple of the photos, and I would kind of do a little blurb about the background and connecting. So, oh, this is from this poem, and kind of showing the behind the scenes, even though no one had the book at the time. But this poem was built out of this picture, and kind of giving an audience something to think about. How did you build the poem out of that? I don't know.
I mean, that's a good question, I guess. How did you? What was your process for building the poems out from the photos?
I love using photos because I love finding ways to cheat with poetry. Although it's not cheating; it's just writing poems. But I love to. It's more tangible to see like the setting. I love to figure out like what are the windows like, and just asking. It's my historian brain's kind of going off and saying, okay, so who took this photo? What was the reason? Was it staged? Was it candid? And what was the reason? Was it a newspaper reporter coming in to take photos of the institution? Was it staff taking pictures? What are the kids doing in the photo? How is the staff acting? Like what are the expressions? So it's a lot of just writing down what I'm seeing. I've kind of come to the point with my writing process where I recognize that I'm not going to write a poem from a first draft. It's like a 3 or 4 draft process, and that first draft is really about writing down what I'm seeing, what I'm feeling, kind of getting all the words down on the page, so that the next draft I can kind of place things around a little bit, play with it. But really, that first draft is about writing down kind of like a field notes of what's happening, and 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 then slowly building out what's important, what kind of I can latch onto that will drive the poem, and what kind of feelings are coming out of the photo. And I mean, I love looking at archival photos. I think it's so handy. Just asking those deeper questions and never taking anything at face value, asking the deeper questions of like, what's going on here? Because often it's like, did these kids want their photo taken? Like, what was the reason behind this? Was this to prove that they were being treated well? Or was it staff just taking pictures? Are the kids smiling? If they are, like, why? If they aren't, why? Just so many questions.
Yeah, photos seem interesting because depending on the photographer, there might be like a pointed narrative that the photographer is trying to do as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. I like the idea of building off photos too, because I used to do this thing where I'd go to an art gallery and it would be very generative. Like whenever you look at something, you just, for some reason, as a writer, I find that words just pop up when I look at something.
Oh yeah, art is fantastic. Just even if it's like abstract, whatever you're pulling out of. I know like ekphrastic is like the term for writing from photographs, but like there's such a spectrum of or not even just writing from photographs, but art and some other form, a different medium, and putting
My
that into
friend
words.
did a program called, or a book called Found Polaroids. And he just had this big collection of found Polaroids, and he had people write 250 word stories based off the Polaroid, whatever they wanted, and then he turned that into a book.
That's
Very
awesome.
cool project.
It's
Yeah,
just like endless writing prompts,
exactly.
which is perfect for anyone who's like, oh, I don't know what to write.
There's a symbiosis between the visual artist and the written artist, I think. They kind of
Absolutely.
feed off each other.
I did a collection of paintings and poems too that nobody should ever read because it's old. But I found it, yeah, yeah. But I also found it very generative to look at a painting and just that's like that I'm going to have to write a poem and show, not just generate something, but actually show together. But it does feel like cheating sometimes because it almost, like I said, the words just come out.
Yeah, I love any kind of workaround you can do as a poet. Whatever I could get it, however quickly I can get it on the page, the better.
Did you say there was a word for working off photographs?
Ekphrasis.
Oh, it's already in there. Yeah, it's interesting because that word did stick out that I had no idea what that meant.
It's a weird one that will always get the red underline in Word.
Yeah, Word doesn't even have it, hey?
Yeah, needs to get with the times.
Callum, was there any last things you want to add, or should we jump into a little rapid fire?
I think you've got it covered, and Shannon, we must commend you on your ability to answer questions we haven't asked yet. It's made our jobs quite easy. So yeah, let's go into the rapid fire questions.
It's been a long pandemic. I haven't talked to many people, so I'm all about let's talk about writing. Yeah.
That's
what we're here for.
Callum, if you want to jump into them, maybe we can go back and forth.
I will dive head first. What time of day do you write, Shannon?
Ooh, I think I'm probably more of a night owl. Mornings, I'm definitely not a morning person. I've been a grad student for too long to consider morning a productive time. But yeah, usually in the evening, 10 or beyond is when I can kind of decompress and get some words on the page.
You find the world is gone at night, and that's why?
Yeah, less noise around, inside and outside.
I was the same person forever, but then when I had a full-time job for a while, I had to move to morning. It was very sad. Yeah.
That will happen.
Do you have a writing goal? Like with poetry, it's interesting how that would work. But do you have some kind of goal that you try and do that's maybe every day or every week?
Oh, I wish I was a consistent writer. I wish I was disciplined. You'd think after like so much school that I'd like be disciplined by now. No, but like when I do sit down to write, I like to get that first draft, that bones of the poem down. And I mean, asking for more than one poem a day, I think is asking a lot for me these days. But just getting some words down on the page, like 15, 30 minutes, I think is a nice time to just see that I've done something, give myself a high five and like, okay, we're making progress. As long as you get something down, I think you're moving forward.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good mentality. Because sometimes people, when they have too big of goals, they're like, I got to do 2 hours. They won't even start.
Yeah.
Because they're like, it's too long.
Been there. Yeah.
What does your writing space look like?
It depends. I would love to say that I sit at my desk and I like type away eagerly, but often I'll just be in my living room on the couch. For poems, I really love just using like written the notepad just to get my ideas down. And often it'll be when I'm getting into my second or third drafts that I'll switch to my computer. But yeah, my writing space is mostly clean. Go from desk to couch where I can watch YouTube and distract myself. But yeah, usually just kind of hanging out in the living room.
Callum, do you write notes and stuff on like handwritten ever?
I don't. I use a notes application on my phone. Usually, if I'm
Mm.
away from my laptop, I'll write a quick note and like be like, this is supposed to go here when you get to your computer. But yeah, I should get a little notepad or something because I found, my penmanship aside, the act of writing physically, like it opens something up. I feel like a lot of people feel that way too.
I'm the opposite. And that's why I was asking because Shannon, you write on a notepad sometimes, but I'm the opposite where I can't feel like I write. I can think like my writing, like thinking, can only happen on a computer for some reason.
I think it depends on genre also, because if I write fiction, I'm definitely not writing it on a notepad. That's too many pages to kind of throw into the computer, and I don't have patience for that. But I like the idea of using a notepad, especially for that first draft, because I can make arrows and move things around, cross it out. But once it gets a little more serious, and I like to have things, I like to collect kind of these papers to look back on, because then I have all my ideas kind of hanging out. And if I want to go back and oh, remember that line, and I've I feel like on the computer sometimes you'll just delete something, but like it's gone, and then it's gone forever, and they're like, well, that could have been a great line for something else, and it's gone. The brilliance is gone.
I'm really into Google Docs because it's got a history.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. My mentor just told me he started using Scrivener, and it's a bit hard to change over, but he's liking it. And it's got like a very detailed history.
Okay, yeah, I looked at Scrivener a few years back and was like, nah, this seems a little too complicated for me right now. I'll
Same.
Stick to Word. I know mostly how that works.
You said you've always been a writing nerd, but when did you start taking it like very seriously, or when did you go, oh, this could be something I can actually do?
Oh, you want to get mega nerdy on me? We'll go back to some fangirling. When I was doing my undergrad a million years ago now, I went and saw Miriam Toews read in Vancouver, and I was just in complete awe of her and her writing and her humor, and I was just like, wow, that's like something I really want to aim for. And I had been taking creative writing classes for years on and off, and I did okay. Um, but it wasn't until then when I was like, like maybe I should start thinking about this more seriously. And after that, I talked to my writing professor and like did a directed studies and was working towards like, hey, maybe I could do an MFA in writing. Maybe this is something that could possibly lead to something else. And I think that's when things changed. And I was like, oh, I could actually like declare a major now, which was fun and exciting. And then once I got to the MFA in writing program, that's when like I was surrounded by all these writers. Like, oh, like we're all amazing writers. This is really something. I've like not everyone gets into the program, right? So it's clear that you've got some talent to get there. So that was really a turning point where like, oh, okay, like I'm really gonna take this more seriously.
That's what I have to tell myself all the time when I'm working on
Yeah,
first drafts.
You didn't get this far on just like word vomit.
I also had no idea it was pronounced Taves.
Taves, yeah. No idea. I said it wrong for many years, but Taves, yeah. She's great.
And you mentioned that like poetry, that was your more weaker area, but we do have the question, what poem or poet do you remember getting really into? You can also answer that for any other form of writing if you'd like.
I mean, the big one was Miriam Toews. I like nerded out hardcore on her for quite a while. Like the kind of writer where you like read one book and they're like, well, I guess I have to read everything they've ever written. She was a big one. I think probably the most informative. And it's funny because like she's a fiction writer for the most part, and now I'm like a poet, and so like how does that work? But I mean, I loved being in Saskatchewan so much because there was so many poets, and they exposed me to so much poetry that like there's so many poets that I love now that I couldn't even name them all. I'm trying to pick out just one. I probably can't even think of one name now on the spot.
But that's like I said with what's your favorite movie? And you're like, I've never seen a movie before.
Movies? I mean, one of my favorite poets is our own Jeanette Lyons. She's she's one of the writers where I read one of her collections, and then it was just like, now I own all of her books, and now how do I like slyly get her to sign them all without being a weirdo? I think I still have a
I
few
think you
books.
trip. I think you trip and drop them
Oh,
all, and you say, "Oh,
oh,
where did these all come from?"
all these blank pages.
Before I pick them up, I have a pen here.
I'm still working up to get the last few signed.
You talked a little bit about your process that you just you almost like write field notes about it. But do you feel like you more like you kind of need a structure of a poem before you start actually writing it, or do you just kind of on a whim? By the seat of your pants, I have it written down.
Yeah, I'm a pantser, definitely. With fiction, I'm much more. I like to have plans and just have a lot of direction. But with poems, because you see, I never realized my poems are so short until I like wrote this collection. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm like a short poem writer for the most part. They're like less than a page usually. So yeah, it's usually just like get that one page and yeah.
I'm a short poem writer too. Get in, get out. Get in,
Pretty
say
much.
something, get out.
If you go too long, there's too much space to like ruin it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the time of the epic is coming past. But what are you reading right now? What is a book that you're reading right now that you'd like to talk about?
Right now, I'm actually in the middle of working towards my qualifying exams for my PhD. So I'm reading a lot of history of asylums and madness and Canadian asylums. Real lighthearted stuff, you know. But let's see what else. I mean,
what are the qualifying exams?
So traditionally with a PhD, you do like comprehensives, which is intense, like 1 year of reading like everything ever. But qualifying exam is more focused, and you're reading more exactly the field that you're going to be doing your project on. So it's more about like 50 sources that really encompass your project that you can kind of draw off of, and then you write like a big essay about using all those sources to kind of show that you've learned something. That's the easiest way of putting it. And I'm glad it's a much more focused way of approaching kind of working to hit that goal before you do your PhD project. So I don't know if I could name specifically. One work I'm rereading right now is called A Special Hell, which is by Claudia Malacarita, who wrote about, it's about institution in Alberta, which Michener Center, which there was a lot of eugenics happening and abuse, similar to Woodlands. So just, it's a real downer of a summer as far as reading, but very interesting and necessary histories.
Yeah, this whole podcast is just a veiled attempt to get you to recommend books. But what is there a book on writing that that really helped, like actually on like structure or poetry while you were doing your MFA or right currently?
Oh, here's another one to nerd out over. I'm sure, hopefully, Jeanette's mentioned. If not, if you haven't done the poetry part yet, you're probably gonna get hit with this book. But Mary Ruefle's Madness, Rack, and Honey. It's like, for my cohort, it was pretty much the Bible of poetry. And it's fun to see her. She has a great lecture about erasure, which Jeanette actually had us watch, which is kind of what sparked my interest in erasure. So Mary Ruefle is
how do you spell her last name?
Ruefle, I believe.
We did do the poetry, but she did not come up. Hey, Callum?
No, Ruefle did not come up. That was,
we did it.
It's a great book.
We did it with Sherry.
Okay, so she probably has a little different.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's Mary Ruefle is, she has a really dry sense of humor, and it's a great book whether you're a poet or not. It's a great book on writing. Everyone should read. My copy is worn so much, and it's one I always come back to. Highly recommend.
Like I said, it's just a veiled attempt to get some good books.
There you go.
Here's a tough one, and back at it again with book recommendation. The desert island question. If you could bring one book to a desert island, what would it be?
That's a thinker. I mean, I'm probably gonna have to go back to Miriam Taves. The one book that I actually met her. I've met her a couple times and only cried once. Not that you heard that from me, but she signed a book for me. But it was called Swing Low, A Life, and it was, I believe it was her first book, but it's actually like a nonfiction writing about. She writes about her father, but from his point of view, leading up to his death. It's really it's a downer, of course, but it's really good. And she signed that one for me, and it's traveled with me everywhere I've moved since. And I'd probably bring that one because it's one book that will always, for the longest time, I would buy it for friends as gifts. Yeah. So it's a heavy one, but a really good one.
Absolutely something to bring with you when you are, staring down the rest of your life on a deserted island with nobody else.
Trying to bring the mood down even more.
Well, no, like it could get worse. Could get worse.
It could get worse. Just a little reminder.
Last question, but what's something about writing or about poetry or about fiction that's been on your mind lately? For example, mine's just like, how do you end short stories? I don't know how you, what's the process? What are you trying to do when you end a short story? It's just, I've been thinking about a lot.
Yeah, I've been thinking about poetry a lot and how, oh man, poetry is such a diverse thing that like, I always, I love reading other people's work because I love seeing how they get into a poem, how they exit a poem, like just the little things that they'll pick up on and write a poem about. Like I never understand how people can write about like social media or texting. I've always like stayed away from kind of putting current technology in, but like at a certain point I need to like get with the times and be okay with writing about current technology, even though like that stuff will date the writing. I don't know. It's
sometimes I find cell phones ruin premises.
Yeah. Write about car phones or
because it's just like, why didn't they just call each other or text each other? And you're like, oh well, it's because it's 1990.
You really have to. That's why I love writing in the past, because you can explain things away a little easier. It's like the horror movie.
You know what's also hard about writing in the present that I didn't think of till now, but like the 60s, 70s have a feel, but the present doesn't quite have a feel because it's not developed yet.
Yeah,
you know
absolutely.
What I mean? Yeah. So it's like, it's kind of hard to go for the feeling you want. People will recognize the 70s, but people won't recognize, I think, the feel of the present yet. It hasn't defined itself.
Yeah, even like the early 2000s, like how do you? It's
not old enough yet to feel it.
Yeah, and it also depends like your age and what you've experienced up into that point.
Callum, since you're halfway through, I'm also interested in what's on your mind of writing lately and with your mentorship.
Same as it's always been. How do you write? How do you get that?
How do words?
How do you? How to build momentum, I think, is another thing. Like you said, like how do you end a short story? I think it's you twist the knife, whatever knife it is, you have to twist it. But like how to maintain momentum and how to maintain interest.
Do you mean your momentum in writing, or do you mean the story's momentum?
The story's momentum. I mean, once there's momentum in the story, once you can feel, the engine chugging along, you kind of get pulled along with it. So the momentum happens both on paper and in your heart.
Right. Yeah, I guess you start exciting yourself.
Yeah.
It's probably how you build momentum. Yeah.
Yeah, short stories are hard because like whenever I've written one, I'm always like, well, I want to write about 100 more pages. Like, no, it has to be a short story. You can't try to make everything into a novel. Like you really
Yeah.
have to focus. Even with like
Well, yeah, that was-
flash fiction, like it's so hard.
That was the reason I asked Callum for the distinction, because he's writing a novel, but I've written 2 novels. But I found when I write short story collections, that momentum disappears myself, not the story's momentum, but I like, oh, I have to restart and I have to write another one. And you have to like build up, get in the story, and then it ends. Then you have to do another one. And it's like, I had a hard time at first building up my own writing momentum, because you just, you stop and start a story every 2 weeks.
I've been mentoring this young writer who's working on like a body of short stories, and I think he's got the right idea. He's taking like a single like concept or feeling and coming at it from different angles. He's taking like a single concept or thesis and just like, I can come at it from this angle, that's one story. I can come at it from here, and that's another. That might be a way to maintain momentum.
That's what I was doing, but I split into 2s. So I'd have like an idea, like for example, I want to do metafiction, and I would do 2 stories on that. So at least it would build a little bit more momentum with the same kind of concept.
Yeah,
Anyway, Shannon, we'll end it there, because now we're getting off into our own things.
Just be talking forever about short stories.
Yeah.
They're a hard one to crack.
Well, thank you for joining us, Shannon. Thanks for Callum.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's been great.